The fourth image is an image that just when I see it like this, it reminds me a bit of Sri Lanka, but that's just off. It's okay. So the bottom of the image is like these tiles of maroon with, say, yellow checkerboard, and then there's kind of the white wall. There's these nice wooden doors. There's two sort of banners on left and right, and there's the stairs coming up off the images from the left and right. So it's a very symmetrical image. The sky is like full on polarized blue, looks practically black. Beautiful sunny day, practically high noon. Do tell, why this image? What is going on?
Well, this is a pagoda in Ladakh, India.
Okay.
And that poster is of me.
That is you, right?
Yeah, so this is me. So the amazing thing is I got invited to the biggest monk festival in the world. To speak to the head monks who are basically at the level of Dalai Lama, but in a different family. And so Dalai Lama is a bit more on the political side. In this category, it's more about environment and social improvements. Right. And I had met him 4 years ago in Hong Kong. And
him being
the head monk. And
what a life!
He remembered me, and from our discussion, he started doing long walks, pilgrimages across the Himalayas, picking up plastic.
Oh, wow.
With hundreds of people.
Amazing.
And they invited me to come speak. And I said, well, I can't turn that invitation down. I went to this 5-day event. I was the only foreigner there. This was just last September.
Wow.
And I spoke to all of their, his excellency and all of his community. And it was just a spiritual, an amazing event. They fully embraced what we want to do. So we're now working with community. So I found all the stakeholders that need to work together. They all admitted that none of us could do this by themselves because they live there and they can't communicate with these different groups as a local person because of the way the sects are and the cultural norms. So I have the president or the head governor of the region and the city, now the monks, and one of the learning institutions, which is the Naropa Fellows. They're the graduate students who are doing entrepreneurial management, so they were all learning about this. Because essentially what I am is an environmental entrepreneur. I'm making creative surprise and making projects without trying to sell a product.
Right.
Necessarily, except now we have a couple that are, puzzles and masks. But so at this event, I got to speak to them, and it's the roof of the world.
Right.
And everything trickles down from the top. So if you think of the ripple effect or the trickle down effect, if the roof is clean and the mountains are clean, we can have a dialogue with everyone downstream from that. And so now we have access to all of the monasteries in the Himalayas.
Oh, wow, of course.
Through this community. And now we're working on a program to be able to bring this into all of those communities. But it's step by step.
Right.
COVID slowed things down, of course. We will be using one of our programs, the Plastic Disclosure Project, which is like carbon reporting and water reporting for companies or municipalities. I'm training companies in Thailand and Malaysia with the UN now to undertake this methodology of accounting, self-accounting.
Sure.
We're going to be doing this for the whole city of Leh in Ladakh and 2 other cities. It will be the first in India, and it'll be a model for how a city and municipality can take the way they change their thinking around plastic and recovery of the material. So when I spoke to His Excellency 4 years ago, I said, the main thing the world needs to do to change with recycling is simply to sort by wet and dry.
Okay.
Only that. Right. Not 3-color bins, 5-color bins. No one knows how to do it. Nowhere to put it. It all gets contaminated. Wet and dry is easy for every single one to know. This is like the rice bags in Cambodia.
Right.
The wet goes out, the plastic goes singular. So organics out. Anything that's dry can be picked through by man or by technology to then have much better value and recovery rate for recycling. So when I went to Ladakh, I told him this 4 years ago, all of the garbage bins, I said wet and dry.
Oh, okay.
And I said, oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And what was even more incredible was I was having lunch with a friend, and you're right, there's crystal blue sky and the sun. I was having lunch with one of the fellows taking me around the city, and I was going to tell him about some of my work. And when I was at the Paris climate talks, we had created this giant image of 350 people in front of the Eiffel Tower. We were the only group that got permission during the Paris climate talks to do a public event because of the Paris attacks.
Yeah.
Which were 7 weeks earlier. Everything was afraid. We got approval 2 days before.
Amazing.
We made this image. It was on the front page of the Le Monde and New York Times. And I walked out of the rest. I didn't tell him this story because I just decided not to say it. 2 minutes later, I walked out the door onto the street of the main bazaar, and on the wall of a window of the store was a picture of our image with a headline of India joining climate talks.
You could not have placed it better.
I almost started crying.
Oh, wow.
I mean, here I am in Ladakh, and I saw this thing that we had made in Paris.
That's incredible.
The Paris one is a lot like the sculpture for the skyscraper of the whale. So I like doing those kind of big, awe-inspiring discussion features.
I had no idea you're such a rock star. It's amazing. Okay. If you look back, what would you say was one of the most fulfilling failures that you've had? You know, where you had a failure and it really hurt at the time, and yet that opened doors for you. They're just like, wow, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was a necessary
drop off.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, I don't know about a failure, but I'll have a good story here. But one thing I was going to say was when you said because it is hard when you're alone or you have a small group, and I work with people, not many people in Hong Kong, but I have different people in different countries, but we're not a full team. We're hired, I hire them based on projects, and I tap into them when needed. But in a way, it's like you don't have a lot of people to tell all these things to, and you think, wow, is this going to work? But I seed so many things throughout the year that at any one time, something's blossoming.
Okay.
And that sometimes makes me crazy, because sometimes last November, for example, I had 6 huge events blossom in the same month.
Oh, wow.
The Whale, the UN event in Singapore, in Thailand. I have 2 big races here. One that I was organizing all around Hong Kong Island, and then something else. And when all that is at the same time, then you know.
For sure.
But it makes life interesting. Yeah. So one of the things that I knew I was on the right track, but this was before we announced the Plastic Disclosure Project, which is very much like carbon reporting. We were 10 years ahead of the world on this thinking. But the benefit of it is that you can do this without the need for bans, taxes, or legislative changes. So anyone can do it immediately, and it can really start helping the planet if people use it. So I got introduced to a guy at UC Berkeley. I'm a undergrad at Berkeley. And I didn't know who he was. I didn't spend time to look at his background. And I talked to him. I didn't really tell him everything I was planning to do for this, because I didn't want to expose it, but I gave him some ideas. He said, "Oh, no, I think that's a really bad idea. You shouldn't do that. You need to do more studies. You need to go out in the ocean and find out, really what is the cause and how much is in there." And in my head, I'm thinking, that's another 5 years, 10 years wasted time, another bunch of money.
Sure.
And so I was a bit bummed out, because I thought I had a great idea. And this guy said, "No, you can't. You shouldn't do that." And so I went home and I found out who he was, and he was an top official from one of the chemical companies.
Of course.
And he's basically, literally, I've heard from other people, was a spy and an implant into the university to slow projects down.
Okay.
And as soon as I heard that, I said, I'm on exactly the right track.
Yeah, you're hitting the right nerve.
I'm launching this.
Yeah, nice.
That's what gave me the power to say, I'm going for it. So I applied for the Clinton Global Initiative project.
Nice.
President Clinton knows a lot about waste and garbage and water pollution.
Yeah.
He saw our project and he said, this is one of the best things I've seen. And out of his 4-day event, he put our event announcement at the opening plenary in New York with him. And so I was there, and they said to me the night before, Doug, you might not be able to be on the stage with President Clinton tomorrow morning. I said, why? Because there's 2 CEOs from the chemical companies will be in the audience, and we're not sure if we can do this. Because this was a real affront at that time, 10 years ago, on this topic. And they called me about 8 p.m. They said, Doug, we can get you on stage. I said, what happened? They said, well, the CEOs can't make it. They won't be there at that opening session. So President Clinton agreed to do it. So there I was up on the stage, and we announced this thing to the world that disclose your plastic footprint.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Dude, yeah. To use a real cheap word, amazing. Yeah, so what amazing? No, it's crazy.
But we're still here. We are 10 years later, and it's only now catching up to be the time when all of this is ripe. Luckily, I'm still here doing it.
Right.
Because often I do things and then it's too early and I move on to another.
What I work in the most, it's like spend the most of my psychic energy and intellectual energy is around this idea of leadership and of how do you get people to want to follow you, to want to believe in you. And so have you had very formal leadership training beyond what you were exposed to in school?
No.
But I think the sports is definitely a frame.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I have not. I'm pretty good with people. I'm social. I like to be with people. I think I can interpret between, an environmentalist and a government official and a banker and a swimmer and a kid.
Right.
I mean, I speak to 8-year-old kids. And but I haven't had the training. It just comes. And I don't know why, but it's sometimes I do things on my own, and then the local people in that place see me doing it. And this is the case in Cambodia.
Right.
They come along. It's almost like you're the Pied Piper.
Yeah.
And they don't know why, or I don't know why, but it's happening. Yeah. So it kind of came self-trained, I guess.
Right.
But I think that the topic, one of the things, I don't do, and we're quite business friendly, is we don't go out and bash people, and we don't try to say, don't do this and don't do that, but we give constructive ideas. We're all adults. So, okay, you have to make 1 million computers. How can you make those 1 million computers with 20% recycled content in the back instead of 0? Have you thought about that? Why not? Talk to your supplier. I talked to a big company in the U.S., a huge athletic retailer, and they said, after I just did my talk, I didn't even tell them anything to do. The guy stood up and he said to all his staff, he said, guys, we import 27 million pieces of clothing to ourselves every year, each in an individual plastic bag that the consumers never see because it's ripped off when it goes on the shelf.
Yeah.
And they never even thought about it. And I gave a talk last week at a school here in Hong Kong on a webinar, and I got a note from a woman I know from a different company, and she said, my daughter came home today almost crying, but so excited to be helping on plastic.
Okay.
And she heard your webinar.
Oh, nice. Nice.
And this was someone whose daughter had seen me in this talk, and those things give me the energy to keep going.
For sure. And I think, one of the full portrait of somebody like you is you've got all of these wins that you can talk about that are so impressive. But in my mind, it's totally yin and yang in the sense that for every peak and win, there's an equivalent low that you crossed or you had to pass through. And so people, we don't have to focus on that, but I think that's part of the portrait,
Right. Well, I definitely minimize those lows. I don't like those ones.
Sure.
And actually, to be fair, you asked me what I really, to knock on wood, I haven't had a huge amount. I'd say the more wins are 90% and the lows are 10%.
That's great.
And maybe not huge, but this weekend I'm doing an event. Anna Fisher she contacted me. She's a member of the yacht club. She's a rower. And she said, Doug, I want to raise money for your charity, Ocean Recovery Alliance. I said, oh, great. What are you doing? I'm going to be the first woman to solo row around Hong Kong Island.
Nice.
And I said, wow, that's great.
I saw her ad.
Yeah. And so she's rowing to raise money for us. And so I'm going around the island to do live Facebook feeds at different points on Sunday.
So
she
good.
starts at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. But she's also raising money for a group called Apopo.
Okay.
And Apopo trains rats to sniff landmines.
Wow.
And 5 or 6 years ago, I met a woman of the same caliber as Jane Goodall in Africa who's trying to slow down the trading of bushmeat because there's a huge bushmeat trade which comes from wildlife.
Sure.
It's not the dried and exotics for Asia, but it's real meat. A lot goes to Europe. And I was talking to her, I said, why don't we use the rats to smell for wildlife in these things? So I wanted to bring that training in. Never happened. Then all of a sudden Anna comes along and said, I'm raising money for Ocean Recovery Alliance, and this group that does the rat training is, oh my gosh, I've thought about them like
That's
5 years
so
ago.
good.
So I already contacted them, already talked to them in Tanzania.
Wow.
And we're already going to start a program for testing on certain types of wildlife. When you're in a container ship yard, 6-story containers, dogs can't go up there and smell anything.
Right.
But a rat would be able to go up and find all kind of things. It's pretty
That's
awesome.
a wild and pretty awesome, yeah, for sure. Look, we have to wrap this up a little bit. My apologies for the ambient noise and everything. Really appreciate hearing what you had to say and just kind of getting really to understand a little bit more what you're doing. So somebody who's listening and who wants to kind of take a first step, get involved, what can they do? If they want to, for example, if they want to get involved with you, because you're doing global projects, right? So where can they go?
So Ocean Recovery Alliance is our website, oceanrecov.org. We also have a couple websites. Plastic Disclosure has its own one. But we do have these projects. Cambodia, we're just starting a new one in Kenya. I need funding for these things. It doesn't, it's like squeezing rocks.
Sure.
We have, I can basically work with any company in the world to give them something they'd be interested in.
Right.
Whether it's education, science, packaging, recycling, supply chain. That's just because I've been doing this and I know where all these touch points are.
Right.
And sometimes they don't care about recycling, but they care about engaging youth on education, or they care about water quality, which comes from plastic pollution. Most don't think about that when they talk about water. They think it's toilets and a well.
Sure.
Come to us. We need this kind of support. We're just starting a new program. I mentioned the UN report on the commitments with a whale. We're starting a new program now. We've taken that report and we've made it a new organization, which right now is under Ocean Recovery Alliance, called CAP. CAPP, the Commitments Accelerator for Plastic Pollution.
Okay.
It is, so if you make a commitment as a company, an NGO, a university, and a municipality, we have a scorecard and a toolkit for you to make better commitments. So you come out of the gate with a stronger commitment, a faster one, more replicable. Doesn't matter how big it is, but it will come out with better structure and more likely to succeed. We now have 3 nations as our partners, Fiji, Curacao, and Seychelles.
Oh, wicked.
One in each big ocean area. So we're doing a press release with Fiji next week to announce this, just coming public.
Nice.
So you can, make a commitment. And once you make a commitment, you can then use our Plastic Disclosure Project to look at your company and see how you do the baseline metrics, and then from there you can work on where you're going to make the improvements. So,
wicked.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Look, such a pleasure. Okay, just elbow me, dude. I really thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.